Hello, pre-service teachers. Welcome to the Collaborative Learning Lesson Plan instructional video. In this video, I'm going to teach you several collaborative learning techniques, as well as go over this week's assignment and the model lesson plan. What is collaborative learning? Sometimes collaborative learning is called cooperative learning. It is not just group work where one or two of the students do all of the work to earn the credit and then the other ones just sit back and relax while they let others take the lead. Instead, each student in the group is accountable for the learning, and it requires positive interdependence where each role depends on another one to achieve the outcome. Why collaborative learning? It's going to reduce competition in the classroom. Now, I know some of you are like, but competition's good. It is if you like competition, but not all students love that competitive environment where they're constantly having to display the knowledge that they learned or put their mistakes on display for the rest of the class. This is going to hold all of your students accountable. It should increase engagement for all students, not just the ones who are primed to raise their hands and answer. For our ELLs and everybody else, it's going to develop those interpersonal skills and teach group processing skills. The last two are super important for our ELLs because we want them to be able to practice English in a low stakes environment, as well as to be able to listen to the English of their peers and listen to how content vocabulary as well as social vocabulary is used in different contexts. And collaborative learning allows our students the chance to do that. Many of the terms you're going to hear in this video or that you might see on the PPR or your content exams actually come from the king of collaborative learning, who is Kagan, and he calls collaborative learning cooperative learning. He's got a website, he has tons of publications, he's been around since the 80s. There's all kinds of trainings that you can attend to learn all of these cooperative learning strategies. The majority of the terminology that I'm using today is going to come straight from that Kagan book. One of the Kagan cooperative learning techniques that you're probably already familiar with because we've done it in class is Jigsaw, where we have the home groups and we have the expert groups. The experts then go to learn about a designated topic, and it can be literally any topic in any content area. Then they return home to the group to share. This activity can be used to learn new material, or it can be used to practice a new skill and have students cross-checking those skills. You can do Jigsaw the traditional way, which is by using, pencil and paper and sending them to different areas of the room. Or if you're using Chromebooks, you can do Jigsaw digitally now, where they share a common graphic organizer in like Google Classroom, and then you send your experts to different groups to go read and then come back and fill in that home group graphic organizer together. A Jigsaw example that I've provided for you in this week's folder is on Roman leaders, and it has 4 different leaders that your students would go to. This would be for a history class. So there are 4 different experts in the home group. They then leave, become an expert on each one of these leaders, and they come back to the group and share. And this is something that I purchased from Teachers Pay Teachers, but you could easily mimic this yourself. It's going to have the 4 different leaders, and it has a small paragraph about each, and then 2 questions about those. The experts read that, return to their home groups, and then they answer questions as a group about each one of those leaders, because the goal of the group is to write a campaign speech for the Roman Republic. Keep in mind, Jigsaw is traditionally reading, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you're maybe working in one of the specials like drama or art or PE, you can have them go learn a skill or a movement required in a sport or maybe a rule or something like that in their expert groups, and then they have to come back and demonstrate that. Another example is I have Who Has. This is basically a set of cards, and each student gets 1 or more cards, and then you have 1 card that is labeled Start. That's where you start the question, obviously. Like I have body dysmorphic order, who has a unit of energy? And so these cards would be cut up and dispersed across the room so that the answers aren't standing next to each other. And then everybody has to listen to see if they're going to go next. So another student would respond, I have 3,500 calories not burned off. Who has chemicals used for the body's benefit? I have a calorie, and so on and so forth until it works its way through the whole room, and you get to the end card. This has to be done after students have already learned the content. It's going to be a review or an informal assessment. You can't do this to learn new content because people don't know how to respond to each other, and it's going to get your sequence of the cards messed up. This is also available in this week's folder as a template if you want to make this activity and then change the questions and answers on the card to match what it is you're doing in class. The next example I have for you is called Very Bad Day Drama Circle. This is basically a modification of I Have, Who Has that requires everybody in the class to participate. Everybody's going to get a card. It activates listening skills and movement. For drama, they're going to act things out that are in bold. Like it says, look, pretend to wake up, look at your alarm clock in a panic. Oh no, I'm late. I must have slept in. And they go to the center circle and act this out. Nobody knows what comes next unless they're paying attention. So it says, when you hear someone say that they must have slept in, run halfway around the circle and pretend to bang on a door. Let me in the bathroom. I really have to go. I'm late. Jump from foot to foot like you really have to go to the bathroom. And so then when you hear someone say that, and so on and so forth. So it's sequenced just like the I have, who has. So you could do this with something like PE, where you're going on, movements, where maybe we're talking about like throwing the ball, and so they get here, and it says, when you see someone raise their arm to their ear, go finish the throw, or something like that. You could also do this with your core content areas. Like with English language arts, you could say, do a sequence recall of a story or a play that you've read. You could do figurative language with it, that kind of thing. You can just get creative with it. The Think Right Round Robin is a variation of a cooperative learning technique just called Round Robin. You're going to have a group of 4 at a table. Oftentimes the teachers will have a card taped to the center of the table with who's person 1, 2, 3, 4, or who's person A, B, C, and D. The teacher is going to pose a question. This can be oral or it can be written. The students are then given time to answer that question individually. They can do this orally as they go around the table, or they can all write simultaneously. And then the teacher calls on a student from the group to respond. So they can say, okay, student 1, it's your turn to share. Or you can say, student 1, share within the group, and then you rotate through the students that way. This is a really good alternative to what I'm seeing you guys use in your lesson plans called cold calling, because this is much less intense if you're having that person share within the group as opposed to the whole class. So for your English language learner, knocking down that group size for sharing is really going to help build their confidence and allow them to make those mistakes without having to do it in front of a group of 30 people. So the round robin example that I have for you is actually for chemistry. And you would have 4 students in your group. Each student gets a different sheet of chemical nomenclature, okay? The students then have 3 to 5 minutes to solve the very first problem on their sheet. They don't move on, they solve it and then stop. And then once those 3 to 5 minutes is up, the student passes the sheet to the left and they receive a sheet from the right, and this is a different sheet. They then have 3 to 5 minutes to answer that question on the new paper, and then they're going to pass that sheet, get a new one, answer it, pass the sheet, get a new one, answer it until everybody in the group has answered 4 questions. All of the questions will be different. The paper then goes back to the original owner, who checks the answers, and students are going to have discussions about the responses and say whether they agree, why they don't agree, and kind of argue it out that way. This would serve as a review activity of round robin, but it can be modified many different ways to be all kinds of different learning activities. So those are just a few samples of cooperative learning where everybody has a role in the learning and the entire class is engaged throughout the activity. There are tons of additional options available to you. I copied chapter 2 of the Kagan Cooperative book, which is available in Blackboard in the Week 13 folder. All of these can apply to any content area. You just have to think about how you're going to do it. You can also look at what's available on Teachers Pay Teachers and then modify that, or Google, or whatever your favorite teaching resource is, and modify it to fit the content that it is you are working on. That is what you're going to do for your cooperative learning activity that you're going to submit this week. You also need a lesson plan that activity can fit into. So my lesson plan this week is for biology, and my students are working on predator-prey population and the balance of nature, and they're going to have to calculate predator and prey populations. What I've done to include a cooperative learning strategy here is I did talking chips, which is where each student gets the same number of poker chips. During the conversation, they put a poker chip in the middle when they have shared. And if they have 4 poker chips and they already shared 4 times, they can't talk until the rest of the group has had a chance to go through their poker chips. Then they collect them all and distribute them again. This prevents one person from dominating the conversation and encourages them to stop and listen, and it lets other people who wouldn't normally have a chance to talk. So that's the cooperative learning strategy that I've built into this lesson plan, but you'll note, as usual, I have my ELL supports throughout. Your ELL student this year is an intermediate student again. It's Len. He's in his 2nd year of high school, and he's pretty good at the speaking and listening. He's almost to advanced there, but he's on the lower end of the intermediate scale in reading and writing, so he's going to need a lot of assistance with that. But participating in class discussion, he's pretty comfortable doing that with some support still. So you'll see I've got things like anchor charts, sentence stems. We're doing turn and talk. That's like talk with a partner. Talking chips is my collaborative learning activity. I'm reading instructions aloud to them. I'm also drawing things on the board for them after I do the read aloud. I'm doing the modeling for them, which is required in every lesson plan, no matter if you have ELLs or not. And so you'll see that I have those all the way throughout. And then I even color coded my chart so that they can add and figure out the deer population a little bit easier. Okay, so for your lesson plan, it's the same groups you've been working in all semester. I want you to continue the content you were working on in the last 2 lesson plans, but it's okay for you to skip ahead a few days in your sequencing. For instance, maybe you want to do a collaborative learning activity where you want your students to review, like the I have, who has, but in your planning, you're only on Tuesday, so you're kind of going to jump ahead and just write Friday's lesson plan. I don't need all of that stuff in between. Just make me a note at the top. That gives me the context of where you're at. This time you're working with Lynn. He's a high intermediate student in both speaking and listening, but he's low in reading and writing, so he's okay with discussions. He'll share a little bit for you, but he needs a lot of support in reading and writing, and I need you to provide that support for him in your lesson plan. You also need to make your collaborative learning activity and submit that to the separate Dropbox. And remember, there's all kinds of templates for you to use in this week's folder. And if you need to, go ahead and schedule a conference with me via my booked in link, which is also available in Blackboard, and I'll meet with you via Zoom to go over stuff if you want me to. Okay, this is your last lesson plan for the semester. Next week we're going to be writing a huge um, summative assessment. And so I'll see you next video and I'll show you how to do that. Bye.